Yo, what is up, guys? It's Pedro here. So the Washington Commanders just got some good Brian Robinson news. They also got an update where he is very, very unlikely going to be a Washington Commander in 2025. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell as well so you never miss a video. We're like 200 subscribers away from 16,000. It's free. It takes 1 second. Also, do all that other stuff, notification bell, like button down below. So I said that it's very unlikely he's going to be here in 2025. I would put it at like a 95, 99% chance at this point that Brian Robinson is going to be with the Washington, Commanders. I really would be surprised if he is here in 2025. I mean, we have the first reports on Sunday from Jordan Schultz, and then on Monday we had the report he's not going to play, and then after that we had the reports from other insiders that said that he's going to get traded or maybe released. And then today we've gotten even more and more stuff, and we have the team of not officially put out a tweet or anything, but not Josh Harris, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, they both mentioned that they talked to Brian Robinson, they sat him yesterday, and they basically said they're going to move on from him. So whether that is a trade or whether that's a cut, Brian Robinson will not be on the 2025 roster. I am sure about that. Maybe not 100% sure, but I'm 99% sure that he's not going to be here. When you put this information out there, it's too hard to go back from. So whether it's a trade or a cut, it's going to happen. And the Commanders did get some good news on that front, so we're going to talk about that. Also, just right here, Ian Rapport, him tweeting it out is significant, says they'll likely move on from Brian Robinson, a rare starting running back available. The good news came from Mike Garafolo, who tweeted out that there's definitely a lot of interest in Brian Robinson. They're asking questions about why he fell out of favor in Washington and what kind of fit he might be for him. So that is very good, that is very good news for the Commanders, that there is interest in Brian Robinson from other teams. So, basically from this clip, not going to play it because of copyright issues, but he said that, let's go back, sorry, I switched, I had to cut out for a bit, but basically he was saying that teams are interested in Brian Robinson, and there's actually been a decent amount of interest from a few different teams, and surprisingly teams are pretty surprised. For me, it's not a huge surprise. I mean, it did come out of nowhere. I mean, I guess it makes sense because the Commanders are they wanted to see how Bill Krosky-Merritt would look, and now that they've gotten some evidence that he's played well, and not just during practice but during games as well, then it gives them a little bit more of all right, we can work with him as our RB1. And then you got Chris Rodriguez, you got Austin Eckler, you got Jeremy McNichols. So for me, that's probably why the Commanders made the decision that they did. But I don't think it's anything personal against Brian Robinson. It's just he is not an elite running back one. He's not a running back one in my opinion. He really isn't. They're labeling him as one, these insiders and everything, but when you actually watch him, he is not a very good running back. And I've been saying that for maybe not a long time, but for a lot of last year. I was saying that, and there's also I talked about it in my video when the rumor came out or the report came out, and then there's a video basically of a mic'd up of him kind of complaining about not getting carries. And in this situation, let's say they decided to keep him. Well, you have, and we're past this point, but you have you have Bill Krosky-Merritt, you have these other guys that are going to get carries. Well, Brian Robinson's not going to be happy getting 4 or 5 carries a game. He was upset getting 12 carries a game last year. So that probably factored into the decision as well. I think there are a few different fits that you could see for Brian Robinson. saw some rumors about maybe the Texans. They got Joe Mixon, who he's out. Maybe the Titans with, Tajay Spears being out, he could be, that team could be an option as well. I didn't really do a lot of research on other teams. I saw some people mention the Eagles. No, I saw some people, or actually not the Eagles. I saw some people mention the Cowboys. That could happen. That could be a fit, but I just don't think the Commanders would trade it in the division. But they have done in the past, so scratch that. Yeah, they're gonna have to pay a premium, but it could happen, and maybe the Commanders get a pick. So the fact that Mike Garafolo is saying that they're getting a lot of interest, or decent amount of interest, is really good news. And maybe because this has been trending in the direction of him getting cut, but now I'm thinking maybe the Commanders can get like a 6th or 7th round pick straight up for him. My prediction yesterday, I put a tweet out about it, was that the Commanders give up Brian Robinson and a 7th round pick, and they get a 6th round pick in return. So a late round pick swap for Brian Robinson. You basically just, gain a round in the draft next year. That was kind of my guess. But teams, here's 2 reasons why it, might not happen a trade, and it might just be a cut. One, you lose leverage kind of when you put this information out there. You make your player available almost publicly by, not playing him during the preseason, not having him there. I mean, at that point, the report was already out. But you know what I'm saying? Once this news comes out, it starts to get to the point where you start to lose a little bit leverage because you're basically saying you don't want the guy. And, if you don't want the guy, then you might cut the guy. And if you cut the guy, these teams don't have to give up anything. And then also the fact that, they're a little bit skeptical of why the Commanders moved on from him. But I already gave that information. But here's the thing. Yes, the Commanders will likely cut Brian Robinson if they can't agree to terms on a trade. I would be very surprised if they did not do that. But Mike Garafolo is reporting there's interest from multiple teams. Well, if there's interest from multiple teams, they aren't all going to get him, obviously, if he gets cut. So if you want to guarantee that you get him, you trade for him. And whether that's, again, a 7th round pick, a 7th round pick swap, a late round pick swap, a 6th round pick, maybe even a 5th round pick. Again, don't think that's happening at all, but you never know. Then, maybe the Commanders make that move, the Commanders would obviously make that move, but maybe that team makes that move just so they ensure they get a guy like Brian Robinson. Because for the Texans, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the guy, can be a workhorse running back. Is he going to be very good? No. But he can, take over some carries for you while your running back's out. And Joe Mixon's hurt. Don't know what the deal is if he's going to be right back for week 1, but not, he might not be. He's also pretty injury prone, and he has an injury history. So having a guy like Brian Robinson wouldn't be a bad idea. There's some, I think JP Finley said B-Rob doesn't have a locker, but then he also said Terry didn't, or Chick Hernandez said Terry didn't. So don't really read too much into that. I mean, B-Rob's just not there, and they know he's going to be gone. So that's that. And then here's some stats, rushing, DVOA, just efficiency stuff. And Chris Rodriguez had the highest number by far. Then you had McNichols, sizable gap between him and Rodriguez. And then Eckler and him were somewhat close. And then Brian Robinson was 38% below C-Rod. And, now you added, Bill Krosky-Merritt. You still got Rodriguez. You still got McNichols. You still got Eckler. It's still a good room. I just, it would be nice if you can get some, draft capital for Brian Robinson, and then it makes this good and, gives you some more draft capital to play around with next season. But that's kind of it for today's video. The good news is, they're getting more interest than maybe I thought and we thought with, Brian Robinson, and, they might be able to get something in a trade. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.